Okay, they said I should speak in English, so. Okay, so thanks all for coming. Thank you, Leo, for the invite. I met Leo, I think 2018 or 19 when he worked for Code Anywhere back in the day. He did whole campaign at Shift, and since then we're kind of on and off all these events, and finally I got a chance to speak at one of them. So today I'll talk about AI won't replace you, but it will expose you. As you can probably tell, it's a vibe-coded talk that I did with Claude. The title is very catchy, but it's not really the point. This whole talk is not really me talking to you. It's more going to be a conversation between me and you, and kind of sharing where I think the world is going to go and the tools that I use to make myself more efficient. But also I expect to hear from you what you think and how you're harnessing AI for your workflows. A bit about myself. I'm a software engineer. I'm 25 years old. I started my career 10 years ago at this point, working for Gamma Chef. I don't know if anyone here has heard about Gamma Chef. Raise your hand. Yeah, of course. So for those of you who don't know, it's founded by Giuliano Nola, one of Split's founders. He tried to make a robotic chef, basically, and that was back in 2015. The company was started. And that was my kind of first job where I did some integrations for these robotic chefs. And then in 2018, after that, I joined DUMP, the Association of Young Programmers from FESB. And then before leaving to Zagreb to go to FER, I met my current employer and CTO, Vedran, and then worked for Code Anywhere for a few years. And now I work for Daytona. But let's get into this talk. So this talk is basically, why is this the first slide? Because I really don't know if anything will be relevant in 6 months or a year that we talk about today, because the landscape is moving so fast that I don't think anyone in the room, or myself included, can say, okay, you should use this because in 6 months you're going to be the best at this and this tool. So this is more of a conversation, sharing where we're at now and where we think we're going to be in the short-term future. So again, mostly vibe-coded slides. That's why you'll see this design all over the place. But basically, this is the landscape in the last few years regarding big AI tools. And I'm not talking about like random AI tools or vibe-coded applications that you can see, or ChatGPT wrappers. These are mostly serious tools with more than 1 million users. So you can see that in 2022, which is just 4 years ago, we had around about 6 tools. And this is the year that GitHub Copilot actually launched. And I remember we were at a conference in, I think, Salt Lake City, and someone asked me, okay, do you use GitHub Copilot? And I'm like, what even is GitHub Copilot at that point? But then in 2023, when we got GPT-4 and Claude, we got Copilot Chat, we got JetBrains AI, we got Bard, which was deprecated since then, but you can see how that's kind of moving so fast. Then in 2024, we got the first software engineering AI agent called Devin, and a lot of different tools. And fast forward to today, we have more than 50 serious AI tools with more than 1 million users. And that's a really rare thing to experience, because I don't think in the history of any tools has there been so much variety in tooling where the customer base is so large. And then also a few numbers. So we see in Stack Overflow even that 84% of developers use or plan to use AI coding tools. I think that number is 99% at this point. GitHub Copilot has more than 20 million users since last year. I think that's probably near 50 million at this point. And 90% of Fortune 100 companies have deployed Copilot. This is actually a serious number, because generally big companies tend to move slower, but even these slow-moving companies are moving so fast that they're adopting AI in everyday workflows, and the scale of it is really, really immense. More code is shipping, but is it actually better? And this is a topic that's going around a lot. And when you think about code throughput before, it's always been about efficiency. So how fast can we push features? How fast can we get feature X to customer B? But at this point, code is becoming cheap. Like producing code is becoming so cheap because you can just prompt what you need. You can get a feature out in 2 hours. And this research shows that more than 60% of developers in this third research showed an increase in efficiency in producing PRs than before without AI tools. But what's happening underneath? We see an 8-fold increase in copy-pasted code, or code duplication, basically. We see 84% more code churn rate. This basically means that there's an 84% increase in code being refactored less than 2 weeks after it was shipped, which is, in my opinion, the most serious problem of everything here, because does it really matter how fast you're shipping features if you have to go back to the same feature tomorrow or in 5 days or in 7 days to fix, like, I don't know how many bugs. And also we can see that in 41% of cases, AI-generated code has more churn than human code, which is, I think, obvious at this point. And also another stat is that this is the first time in software history that copy-pasted code exceeded code reuse and refactoring. And I know everyone here probably like went to school and you learned about how to reuse code, how to create reusable functions, don't repeat yourself, etc. But this doesn't seem relevant at this point. And again, that goes into the cheapness of producing code. Does it really matter if you're copy-pasting the same function 12 times if you can produce it at the speed of actually just copying it once because the AI is producing it and not yourself? But from my perspective, that kind of goes against actually maintaining that code, because everyone here, I know you hate maintaining code that is not well written, that you can get around of. But it seems that these numbers aren't really going in that favor, and we are just churning code that we are refactoring a few days later. And this is a question that I like to ask most people when talking about AI agents. And the question is basically, so who here thinks they're much more efficient when using AI agents and AI to generate code, right? Okay, I think that's most of you here. And a study showed in 2025 that developers predicted that they would be at least 24% more efficient if they have AI tools at their disposal. This means that developers feel confident when using AI that they will become more efficient. But what happened is that they were actually 19% less efficient. And why is that what actually happened? So what happened was that developers who didn't have access to AI tools were actually using their brains, right? They were thinking about the task at hand because they actually know how to solve it. They just used intuition and their engineering skills and experience to actually solve issues. But engineers who used AI tools were just prompting, trying to figure out how to get to the solution, and then once they get the code, they have to read through it, they have to test it out, and then make sure that it works, or fix bugs that it didn't actually fix. And this is the problem with, let's say, your perception about how fast you are. But the more serious problem with this is the next number, which says that after they actually completed the task, 20% of them believed, all of them believed that they were 20% faster again than they were before. And I think that's the biggest issue with this, because it's sort of the productivity placebo effect. When you're using these tools and when you're being so efficient using 5 agents to solve a simple task, you think you're actually being much more efficient than you are. But if you take a stopwatch and actually measure yourself, you might find that these tools are actually slowing you down. So this is what I want to talk about in the later portion as well, and how to harness these tools and some suggestions that I have for everyone here. On the security side of things, this is also a serious problem, but I won't talk about this too much because I don't want to sound too grim. But basically, there were more than 10,000 new security findings month over month in 2025, 88% log injection failure rate, and 2.74 times more vulnerabilities in AI-generated code than human code. Again, if you're churning out code so much, you can't possibly review every line. You can't possibly use your intuition so much. You just churn out the code and kind of say, okay, F it, let it go to production, it probably works because the AI generated, I don't know, 700 tests to validate the code. And before I actually move on right here, does anyone have maybe something to say on this topic, just generally for anyone here? And if you want to discuss, feel free, before we move on to a couple of other topics. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So are these already, because like the new models are and the level that they operate are fairly new, so we still have a big question about how does a project look like 2 years in the future from now when it's all live coder or AI generated. So I'm wondering about this data because I'm worried about the long-term impact, like the curve you speed up at the start and then slow down and it becomes unmaintainable.
Yeah.
Like, do you know about any research, like the longest running research?
Yeah, so I mean, when talking about like longevity of everything, I don't think anyone has the like cut out answer, right? Because there's no longevity. These tools didn't exist 2 years ago. But to your point, so if we take it historically and try to like extrapolate on how software evolved before, it was a software that was maintained well, had well-written code, was isolated properly, was scalable properly. That software is the software that endured. And that's why you learn in school how to actually think about, how to actually think like an engineer and like approach these issues from an engineering perspective and not just churn out code. So if we take a parallel to that, if we think about it as humans do, if we just churn out as much code as we can, who's actually going to review all of that code in the end, or who's going to review the code if something fails in production, or you have, for example, if you think about it from a responsibility perspective or ownership, who's at fault if data gets leaked from your database, or who is at fault if I don't know, your production crashes in 2 in the morning? Is it the fault of AI or the engineer who approved, or the engineer who wrote the test or didn't see the test, etc.? So if you think about it that way, of course, more maintained code or more reviewed code will prevail. But again, we don't know because these models are evolving so fast. Maybe because the models learned on this sort of behavior, maybe it's best for them to write this type of code, and then maybe later they'll catch on and fix those bugs in the end. So, you know, I think it's an open-ended question, and I think we'll just see where it goes, right? Anyone else, maybe? Okay, we can move on. So another big topic is what's actually happening to engineering jobs. Maybe for some younger folks in the audience, a bit of pessimism. But we'll get to the optimistic part. So we see that developer employment ages 22 to 25 had decreased by 20%. A couple of other grim numbers, and then the grimmest number is junior dev postings have dropped by 60%. So I think this is also about perception and perception of employers, the perception of employers, basically. So if you think that AI agents can churn out code on the same level as junior developers, why do you actually need junior developers in your company? And I think that's something that everyone is thinking. And I know that like training junior developers is a hassle, it's a time waster. Why would you do it if you can just prompt an agent to like churn out 6 PRs a week, the same like throughput of a junior developer? And that's why these junior dev job postings are dropping so much. And I'll assume that that's largely the thinking here. I don't want to make you raise your hands because that's an uncomfortable thing to accept. But that's kind of the prevailing opinion. That's what data shows. But from my perspective, it's also, again, about maintainability of your, let's say, of your company in the end. So if you're not actually hiring juniors, who's going to be there in 5 years to actually take over the work of the seniors who are leaving? You have to think about that developers don't want to stay in your company. Like in 99% of the cases, developers won't stay in your company for more than 10 years, or they'll switch jobs, they'll go to mirovina, how do you say it in English, retire, right? So you need to think about the kind of the next generation who's going to take over the company culture in the end. And in that sense, it might make sense to invest in a junior and then kind of bring it up in your company, make it part of the culture, and that junior will then kind of own the parts that those seniors are actually churned out with all of this AI, right? So, and from a business perspective, again, maybe it doesn't make sense because AI subscription is probably cheaper than junior. But if you're thinking about your company in the long term, you really need to think about sustainability. And if we run out of juniors, that's also a problem, because if job postings of junior developers go down to 0, who's going to actually, in 5 years, maintain all of the code that these seniors actually churned out? So a thing to think about. But if you're still in school and are wondering what do you need to do to actually get a job in 2 years or 5 years, it seems that it's pretty obvious which kind of jobs are hot in the market right now, and those are jobs related to AI and ML and applied AI especially. We can see that AI tool experience required for these job interviews are jumping to 340%, which basically means that if you're thinking about applying to any positions, you need to learn to harness these AI tools before you can actually apply. But also AI ML engineering postings have been going up by 85%, while all of these other ones are dropping down. So if you're thinking about your master's degree or your major or whatever, I definitely suggest leaning in that applied AI space and machine learning, because it's so cheap to churn out code. If you can actually think like an AI or ML engineer, it might give you the edge over other people who are just, let's say, developers. But these are kind of some of these summed up fundamentals that I think that will give you the edge in I don't know, the job market, or essentially in your company or with your colleagues. It's basically these 6 things is something that AI at this moment can't replace. Especially the first 5 things are something that currently it won't do very well, but it might do in the end, which is system design, code quality standards, debugging intuition, security mindset, and output evaluation. That's something that, again, currently the models are not very well equipped to do, but it's something that we can consider they will be able to do in a few years or maybe months, who knows. But the last thing is communication and judgment. I think that's something irreplaceable, right? You won't be sending your Claude agents to your meetings. Maybe you will to sum up the conversation, but you don't expect them to make any kind of judgment calls, or I don't know, you won't be sending an AI agent to, I don't know, fire half the company like some other companies, big ones do maybe, but communication and people skills and intuition, talking to customers, for example, you will always need engineers to talk to customers about their needs. You won't be sending AI agents to do that. And that's something that, again, emphasizes that, for example, soft skills are something that engineers will need to get better at, for example, I think. And I think maybe engineers are always thought of some, I don't know, nerds or geeks or whatever. But I think from this perspective, if AI can take away your, let's say, coding or programmer skills, if you can churn out code, you have to be able to actually bring up your value in soft skills, in judgment thinking, in system design, general understanding of the product, and things like that. So before I go into the next part, any thoughts on this maybe? Any hot takes or things like that?
I have one thought, but
yeah.
more related to the previous slide.
Yeah.
When you said who will be junior who will be senior when juniors are not improved.
Yeah.
So there is a thought that comes to me, and that is that the world in the last 50 years or so did not need a junior COBOL developers, and COBOL is still running in some bets.
Yeah.
So just that.
Okay, that's an interesting fact. So maybe if you didn't hear, so the opinion is we didn't need junior COBOL developers, but COBOL is running for the last 20 years or something like that, right? Yeah, okay, but I think that's a different take to it, because like learning COBOL, it's kind of like I don't know, learning C++ or JavaScript or Python or any kind of language. I think that's a skill that anyone can do basically, but it's the thinking, the engineering of it that's important, right? It's being able to think like a COBOL engineer. But someone who's a senior in COBOL, they were probably a junior 20 years ago. But in that sense, my point with this was that if you're thinking about cutting out juniors, you need to think about who's going to educate them to be actually engineers and not like, you don't really need to teach them to write JavaScript anymore or C++ or COBOL in that sense. You need to teach them how to think about the product, how to actually evolve into seniors in a few years, because AI is not going to teach them that. So I think that's kind of the opinion currently is, because we can churn out so much code, we don't need juniors. They're only good for churning out code and fixing like small bugs. But if you take away that part, again, who's gonna be the engineer in a few years? So with these COBOL engineers as well, who's gonna be the senior COBOL engineer in a few years when all the COBOL engineers retire? So I think someone needs to fill that step in that direction as well. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just on that point. I think we're kind of, I mean, I'm safe for now. I'm already employed and a bit older, but I think junior devs are really in bad spot now, and these numbers show it. Because like you said, it requires companies to look like what to think in long term, and especially in IT, that's not really good. It's like a quarter, maybe a year plan like that too, if you're like looking for a lot of it. But and a lot of like smaller agencies and stuff like that, the founders plan to retire themselves. They're not thinking of creating a legacy for generations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of pessimistic on that. So.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm pessimistic as well. But you know, it's again. I think about this if I was a founder as well. So if you take it from a business side, of course, you would want to like cut expenses as much as you can. But I don't know, like me personally, I enjoy, I don't know, mentoring people, giving talks like this, or kind of, I would enjoy sharing this knowledge, and I don't know, maybe hire at least one junior for a summer or anything, just to kind of share knowledge with them, right? And maybe, because when you think about hiring as well, so the best hires in most companies are people who have been there for a long time, especially younger folks who are brought up in companies' values and culture. If you're looking for these like high valued employees, it maybe makes more sense to actually bring them up within the company than to hire outside. So if you're struggling with hiring seniors, maybe it would make more sense to hire a junior and then, or a mid, and then next year they'll become a senior in your own terms. So that's kind of the other perspective of that. But I mean, is it hard to stay optimistic? It is, you know, but yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I'd say I am optimistic.
Okay.
I'm not so sure about these numbers. I think they're all a consequence of this huge hype train about AI. I think there's a lot of issues with scaling AI, IQ today. I think they built this whole hype train on this thought that as they scale the amount of computation that they do, the amount of GPUs, the amount of RAM, that the IQ of AI is just going to go up.
Yeah.
Go up, not exponentially, but linearly. But I don't think that's the case, and it's even now slowing down. I think OpenAI is struggling with Meta. I think that they have had some drama there, but I think this year is going to be really interesting, and this situation may very well flip around, because all these big companies that don't hire any more juniors are all of a sudden, I think, can get themselves into a position where, they're just missing a lot of juniors.
Okay.
And maybe it's going to be a great situation for them.
Okay, that's a optimistic opinion. Okay, thank you for that. A bit of optimism, so no more pessimism. Yeah, go ahead.
I have two thoughts. One of them is optimistic, the other one is pessimistic.
Okay.
If we start with the pessimistic one, I think you said like who's going to be middle senior developer like in 3 to 5 years. But the thing is, for example, here we have like probably majority of here are senior or at least middle developers. It's not like you're all going to die like in 5 years.
No. Okay.
Yeah, you might change your company, but like the thing is, be a shortage of developers in 5 years. The idea, for example, if right now all companies in the world will decide to not take a single junior developer, the actual shortage of developer is it seems to be like a very, very long-term issue, like 15 years at least.
Okay.
Because right now, like, you will go to another company, but you also go to this company, and thus, like, this rotation will make more or less constant developer circle.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're not near retirement. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But we're near burnout at least. So, at least I am. Okay, let's go with the optimism now.
I wouldn't say it's optimistic, but it's, let's say, optimistic for junior developers. The thing I can say about my company, there is already a shift which I don't like at all. Even as a junior developer in my like manager level, why do we need a 70, let's say, $1 an hour developer if we can get 2 junior developers who need, like, let's say, $15 an hour with AI? And this is already happening. We got like some layoffs. A few people got fired, and instead, like, a few, let's say, interns were taken. And it feels like they're planning at least to keep it like this for a while and probably even continue.
Okay.
Which is probably good for junior,
but less good for seniors.
But overall, it sounds like an extremely bad idea,
but it works. Yeah.
Maybe this is also kind of another side of it.
Okay, this was a big hot take. But I mean, I get the point. But I mean, obviously, it's not really a good idea to swap out all your like senior engineers with double the amount of juniors, because who's actually gonna deploy everything and like think about architecture or anything? But yeah, I like the hot take. Let's leave it at that. Anyone else, maybe?
That was optimistic.
For juniors.
I don't like it.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you remember when we started, like 2016, 2018,
yeah.
like a pulse was enough to get hired as a junior.
Exactly.
Like, we had like 10 years of like just shoving everybody who has a GitHub profile into the companies, and this is like part of that as well. It's not
yeah.
just AI.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, the COVID and stuff like that. So just piggyback.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. So these numbers they're definitely not just because of AI, but that's kind of where the conversation is at now. Okay, so moving on to the kind of semi-practical part of the talk, where I'll talk about some agents that I use, some tips and tricks of the tools that we built for ourselves internally and how we actually utilize them. So first of all, top 3 coding agents, Open Code, Claude Code, and Codex. Quick show of hands, who uses Open Code, Claude Code, and Codex? Okay, Claude Code wins, nice. It's actually what I prefer as well, but my setup is mostly Claude Code like 90% and Open Code like 10% of the time for like some deep work, I call it. I have Claude Code spun up on my machine like 24/7, but I have Open Code actually running on a remote server that I can access with Tailscale from whenever I want. And Open Code, I just fire off a prompt that's really deep. So for example, we are currently in the process of migrating from a billing provider from one to another. And I just said to Open Code, okay, here's the link to docs to both the providers. This is the migration document that I need to go through, find out everything I need to do, and create a V2 API on my billing app and actually migrate everything. And it went on for, I don't know, a few hours, I think, in a like deep session. And it actually, by the looks of things, it works. But that's kind of what I use Open Code for if I need to invest heavily in like going deep in a feature and just kind of getting a rough first draft. But like Claude Code, I use like 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions of Claude Code in different work trees and actually work on different features, or I just pasted a GitHub link to an issue and just let it fix it. And the thing that I like about Claude Code is just how fast it is, even though I heard from some people who like overuse it with tools that it gets slower in the end. But I don't really like giving it access to as many tools that I can. I just give it access to tools that are very focused on the task at hand. And it really is all about tools. It's all about MCPs, plugins, connectors. For example, for open code, I use it with Oh My Open Agent, which is probably one of the best plugins for open code right now. There's also Oh My Claude Code, which I really don't know what it is, but on the, let's say, desktop side, all of us at the company use Claude Code on desktop. We have an organization for our company in Claude Code, and then we have all of these connectors connected to our organization. This is an actual screenshot from our Claude desktop. We have Customer.io, Figma, GitHub, Gmail, Drive, Linear, Notion, Posthog, and Slack. So basically, at any point, I can ask Claude, okay, summarize the top 3 Notion documents from yesterday, and like give me a brief, or I can say, okay, who's working on this issue on Linear? Go ahead. Sorry. Like the most vanilla thing ever. So just connect everything and ask it whenever you need. Yeah. But yeah, I know there's companies like working on knowledge graphs for your company and being able to search basically company knowledge on a very efficient scale. To be honest, I just connect everything, just ask it as plainly as I can, and it's working for like 95% of use cases. Rarely do I have to ask follow-ups about something. It just depends on the type of prompt I give it. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's probably on the next slide, or yeah, it's on this slide, but we'll talk about it. Also, another tool very important is code review. So this is actually a screenshot that was sent to us by these Cubic guys, because we use them right now on GitHub reviews. But basically, code review tools, there's endless code review tools. All of them are nothing special. All of them are wrapping some kind of agent already. But if you can get a good harness around them, they can be very useful. So for example, we have Cubic set up with a couple of custom agents, which are basically just prompts, for all PRs, I want you to scan security issues or CVEs that can potentially arise from this dependency or this change in an API, etc. And these review tools have been, I'd say, maybe 70 to 80% great and 20% to 30% bad. And sometimes you can get this, which is basically hundreds of actual comments on a PR that had like about 20 valid ones. But if you can, as I said, if you can focus them down, if you can give them a good enough system prompt, you can get them to a point when they're actually useful. So I urge you to actually try it out. Why Cubic on top? This is some benchmark that they shared, so take it with a grain of salt. But actually, with them, it's been going pretty good for us with as little as config as possible. So for example, CodeRabbit, you can configure every fucking thing in that. You have a YAML file with like 700 lines of code to actually configure it. With Cubic, you just plug it in, you give it an optional system prompt if you want, ignore files, you're good to go. Yeah.
How do you justify the cost? For instance, if we found out that we get the results of agents with skills that don't have obsession and do the review based on our own policies, rather than making a scene for our person.
That's totally valid. That's also a valid strategy. So why this? Because we're open source. So we can configure it in a way where external contributors come on, and Cubic will review that as well. But also, again, seems like I'm shilling Cubic here, but they have a CLI tool as well. So you can give the agent their CLI tool and allow it to review PRs headless before it actually touches the PR in GitHub, for example, so you can kind of eliminate one more step in the process. Yeah.
CLI is like the AI,
No, it's AI, of course. It's basically like a front. Yeah. I mean, but so on that topic, that's a really good point. So I think we're kind of with this workflow, like AI generating code and then AI actually reviewing the code. You're kind of like we're just spinning money for these companies. It's basically Claude is generating the code, and then OpenAI is reviewing it, and then it all goes back to NVIDIA or whatever. But for us, it's been working mostly okay if you can like harness it well enough and like not let it run wild. But yeah, let's go to the top like security problem in the world. OpenClaw. So who here hasn't heard about OpenClaw? Perfect. And on the topic of it's all about tools. So what even is OpenClaw? It's just an agent that can use a lot of tools. That's all. It can use WhatsApp, Telegram. You have a chat interface, and it can use any kind of tool there is. And the most depressing thing about OpenClaw that I found out a few weeks ago is this. So this is the star chart for OpenClaw and for Linux. So OpenClaw, which is a vibe-coded, like, I don't know what to call it, has probably twice as many stars as Linux right now. So Linux, for those of you who don't know, is the most essential piece of software ever written. But then you have this. So yeah, this kind of depressed me for a few days. It was the boss who started. But basically, what this goes to show is that AI is all there is. It's hyped up. It's the thing you need to do. And why is actually OpenClaw so successful? It's because it's so easy to use. It can seemingly do anything. But with that, it seemingly can do anything. It can also break everything. So if you haven't like caught up with the news, OpenClaw was the worst reviewed piece of software for vulnerabilities ever by far. It leaked all API keys a few days after it was released. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. I'm saying use it with read-only access to everything in an isolated network. So for example, I didn't set it up myself because I just don't want to. But basically, any kind of AI agent that I set up gets added to a remote machine that doesn't have any open ports or IPs. It connects to Tailscale on our VPN, and I can access it with my phone even, but nothing can actually go into the agent that I didn't approve. And also, if you're giving it API keys or secrets only, read only, and only what's necessary, you never know what will leak and when will it leak. With OpenClaw, generally, it will leak, but just so be prepared for that. So, but yeah, I mean, it is really an essential piece of software to a lot of people because it's so versatile and can seemingly do everything. But again, be very careful. Does anyone have any like bad stories with OpenClaw right now? Okay, great. And lastly, the last point is just build, which basically means just actually build anything. So I have a folder on my computer called mini apps, which are literally one-shot prompt Go applications that I use for anything. So for example, we had to backfill some sandbox activity in our database, a few million records. I said to Claude, okay, give me an app in Go that I can review that will backfill some tables, like move stuff from this table to another table, do it in batches of, I don't know, 100K, report status on this endpoint, etc. Most of these applications are less than 500 lines of code, which is great because I can actually read everything and review it. And I can like spawn as many of them as I want. So I don't know, deleting some organizations, a trace simulator. So for example, we had issues with our Grafana OpenTelemetry stack, and I created a trace simulator that simulates millions of traces on an endpoint in like 2 seconds. And this is, I think, one of the biggest, let's say, workflow efficiency improvers for me, because I can vibe code and applications for a very specific niche use case in just a few minutes, and it actually works most of the time. Why is it in Go? Because I love Go. Go is the best. One other thing, this is a screenshot from our back office in Daytona. We call all of our agents Mali, which is hard to translate to English, but it's kind of like little guy. Buddy, yeah, okay. Buddy with a capital B. But basically, so what we built is our internal chatbot. And it doesn't use any like sophisticated chatbot SaaS applications or APIs. It's literally just a chat interface with a table for storing conversations and connected to a lot of tools. These tools are data sources, they are Grafana, they are PostHog, ClickHouse, essentially every tool that's connected to our cloud product has or either a read replica with obfuscated data, or it has a read API key that we give to this AI. And then what you can do is basically ask it anything. What's the error rate of API calls in the last 3 hours? What will the agent do? It will figure out, okay, I need to query Prometheus, I need to query Grafana, and I'll find data points with these labels and figure out what was the error rate in the last 3 hours, for example. And somewhere here it will actually make the wrong assumption and hit a wrong endpoint, but it will correct itself and actually give you out the answer. Probably should have shortened this a bit, but basically what I mean by this is if you can build these internal tools, give them access to read access, of course, to anything. Again, this is all behind Tailscale. No one can access this. You can see, okay, it pulled up that the error rate was, I don't know, 0.027% in the last 3 hours. This is some data that's very useful that you can pull out at a short notice. Or, for example, check PostHog for the number of users that signed up in the last 12 hours and how many of them created a sandbox. Not really important data for most people, but for example, for our GTM team, it's important. They want to know how many people that, I don't know, entered the website yesterday actually created a sandbox and API key. That's kind of hard to create a query for that for them, and they don't have to bother you in the engineering department to get this kind of data, analytical data. You can just give them this and they will query it themselves. And that's basically it. Before I close off, any examples from you guys, maybe for internal tools that you created that are kind of driving your company forward? You have something, yeah?
This stuff for myself, but not really driving the company. I have a couple of things. I wanted to ask you about how you handle like long-running tasks.
Okay.
Run open code like for hours. I have some kind of implementation of the route book that's kind of extensible. It's my own.
Yeah.
So I have that, and I have a tool which kind of handles my markup files because I have like thousands of those at this point, and it's kind of they're all linked together. It's kind of something like an Obsidian clone, but it has a lot of other features. And data stuff, for example, the docs browser one, the DLD files, is something that I have open for the full workday. Like I prompt the AI on one hand, see the outputs on the other hand, it's the prompts that go back. So it's something I've coded for myself and I'm using it all the time.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the quality because I'm not signing off.
Of course.
For the plan,
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful. So like internal tools can be churned out very fast without any like liability, and you can improve your work for maybe even more in that way than to ship products to users.
Yeah, of course. I think so. Before, I know that a lot of these internal tools before didn't get really time invested from engineers because do you want to actually work on some internal business intelligence tools or do you want to actually ship some product and ship some fixes or talk to clients, etc. But now you can invest like half an hour to create a whole dashboard of anything and just churn it out. If it doesn't work on mobile, who cares, right? Because it's an internal tool, right? So for example, one of our solutions engineers, he built an entire business intelligence dashboard with Lovable. It's the only time he's written any code is in like Python like 4 years ago, but he built like a really, really sophisticated business intelligence tool just with Lovable, with just prompting everything. We give him access to everything read-only and he can just vibe everything out, and it's really been an instrumental tool for, I don't know, reporting to investors, etc. So really try to find like, I don't know, 1 hour a week to work on some internal tooling that will save you like 6 hours on the course of a month, because these internal tools are kind of where the power is with little to no downside because you don't really care if it like crashes and burns. It's fine. If it doesn't work half the time, it's also fine. Half the time it will make you faster, but that's the point. So finding any kind of extra time devoted to this, it's a plus for not only you, but for your entire team as well. I'll close this off and then we can like continue the conversation. I'm thirsty for a beer. Thank you so much, and yeah. Q&A, or we talked enough. Or you can do it in Croatian as well if you want. But yeah, okay, thanks.
Actually, one of the things, or actually the only thing that you didn't mention is what Daytona actually does.
Oh yeah, so why didn't I do that? Because at most talks that I go to, I talk about Daytona too much. So today, no Daytona. But okay, if you really want to know, I'm kidding, I actually forgot. But basically Daytona, we're an infrastructure provider. We provide remote sandboxes for AI agents. On the topic of long-running tasks, actually, I forgot to answer that, sorry. So we provide isolated sandbox environments that you can use and to run anything inside. Think of it like small computers, and you can spawn like tens of thousands of them. And we have people running long-running workloads like agents running for days. We have people running tens of thousands of millions of sandboxes that last 1.5 seconds. We don't really care. We give you the tooling that you can use to spawn these sandboxes, access tools inside, execute code, or I don't know, execute the file system, etc. All shipped up in just small SDKs in Java, Ruby, Go, Python, TypeScript, I don't know what language, basically. But yeah, that's what we do, infrastructure at scale for AI agents. Thanks.